contributions right on the program. All right, I have with me the Private Sector Development Association chairperson, that's Mr. Yusuf Dodia, and we are discussing managing the Zambian debt crisis. For your comments, the number is 0960 If you have questions for my guests, feel free to bring them forward either by mobile phone calling, by standard text messaging, or by WhatsApp. All right. You can also watch us live in living color by logging on to YouTube. Look for Lorenzo Entertainment TV. Subscribe by hitting the red button, and then you'll be able to catch us and make your comments right on that very platform as well. Let me start by reading text messages coming through. This one reads as follows. Morning, Lorenzo. The big problem is our leaders. They were advised by the opposition not to borrow, but they went ahead to borrow so that they can plunder the monies through coordinated corruption. Thanks. This is from Mushimbe B in Lusaka. What do you make of such a thought, Mr. Dodia?
Well, I think the government of the day, whichever government it is, whichever political party, your advice should not necessarily come from
The
your
opposition.
opposition. I think it needs to come from your technocrats, you know, and your technocrats are your permanent secretaries, your Bank of Zambia, and of course even your parliament, which represents the wider majority of Zambians in terms of representation. Again, I will emphasize that borrowing is not a bad thing. If you want to fast track development, you need to borrow. But you need to use that money
wisely.
In the right way. So here, it's not a question of borrowing; it's a question of how we use those resources.
Okay, all right. Let me get this call now. All right, you are through to chat back.
Good morning, Bashimalan.
Washimalan, how are you today?
I'm fine. Now
I'm good, sir. Good to hear you.
So tulingire kumona amamona yenani mulunga kuja mulunga amabo yakola mutengo amabo yaja so bashaka ba government baya babusta bwino inani bata manage bwino yenani yaraine amabo ikongole bakakoshi kongole nomba ngabalika amakati bali amabo yishindi tukabipa impya muzambie mushaba sana muzambie esa kipande sana opa amabo ya mutengo yaine yaja ngatwa tabwino bwino ikongole bakabulisha bwino namba ngatwa makati bali nokabika nishukashupa so government bafika kwa mano sana bakateka amawe ayikolo kwekera makati bali imbawe ekeni abantu tebachikumiye abakwe bacha batwa mano erenje bafira bwino okubushe ikongole kwa mukwa kantu ubwabyo bunakulisha botulimo bafira kwa bagati ngatafuka kwa mano government tabula chwa fyumya yaye so government ifuya kwa mano.
Thank you, Washimalan, for that one. All right, so that's Washimalan making his contribution on the program. Let me get to read another text message before I have Mr. Doja come back. 0960 All right, this one reads as follows. Good morning. Why do governments keep borrowing? Is it impossible to sustain ourselves without borrowing? Humphrey Chamunda. Good question from Humphrey. How do you respond to him, Mr. Doja?
Well, you know, everybody borrows. Even if you look at the US government, the British government, they all issue bonds. The bond market is with every government across the world. And issuing bonds means you are borrowing from the public. Yes, some governments are not borrowing internationally, but they do definitely borrow domestically. And we've seen more and more that you hear that, oh, America has debts to China, debts to Saudi Arabia, debts to this. So internationally, even it's becoming more prominent that governments are borrowing. And you borrow, just like in a business, you borrow in order to fast track development. You know, if I have a little shop where I'm making door frames with my one welding machine. The fact is that if it breaks down, my family don't eat. So I'm living on a hand-to-mouth existence. But if I go to the bank and I borrow and I buy 2 welding machines and the angle grinder, drilling machine, suddenly my production becomes much bigger. And with a bigger production means I'm generating more revenue. And if there's a problem with one of my machines, my business does not come to a standstill. I'm still able to survive. And that's exactly what happens with the government. The government is also trying to make sure that the economy is resilient to shocks and try to fast track development so that more people in that economy can live better lives. So we must not run away from the opportunity to borrow and grow our economies through borrowing. It's really the question of managing ourselves. And I think that you can't, if you feel that I have trouble in managing myself, then try to remove that control from your hands. So let us say we look at Zambia. We have borrowed and we have been struggling to pay back. And we say, no, some of this money we got, we used it in this way, we used it in that way. We do not use it in the right way. The idea is not to stop borrowing. The idea is to put in mechanisms that can stop us from making those mistakes. And one of those mechanisms, for example, is if we want to borrow internationally, if we have a provision in our law, in our constitution, that says if you are going to borrow above a certain amount of money, let Parliament endorse it. And that endorsement by Parliament means you are not being allowed to borrow without getting authority from the people of Zambia. Meaning that when it goes to Parliament, Parliament endorses it, and then you know that you are being given the green light to borrow, and being given the green light on how to use the money. So again, you put mechanisms in place to control you from misusing, and you do it voluntarily, because you know that you may have a weakness and you want to control that weakness. And us who are in businesses, one of the things that we do, which we do voluntarily, and now even the law demands it, is auditing. If I run my business, why do I want an external auditor to come and audit my business? What business is it of his? It's my money, it's my company, I put the money in my pocket. Why should somebody ask me a lot of questions? It's for the same reason that I can abuse. And if I solicit and get the services of an auditor, the auditor is going to tell me, no, here, you are not doing the right thing. There, you are not doing the right thing. And the auditor helps me to, it's almost like a doctor for the economy. That's what an auditor is. So these are the kinds of things that we need to do. And that doctor will prescribe and say, in the future, let's put this mechanism in place so that you don't do this in the future. So similarly, our rules, our regulation, our constitution are the things that we need to continue refining to make it more difficult to abuse the resources that we have, whether it is our natural and national resources or whether it is resources we are borrowing. But to say, let us just stop borrowing is not to address the issue in a very meaningful way. Let us recognize that we are weak. Let us recognize that we have got problems in this area. And let us find solutions on how to deal with those problems so that they don't happen again. And I think our colleague who spoke earlier talked about, that we are not a poor country. We are quite a rich country. We export copper.
Rashimala.
Yes, and we should be able to pay our debts. And if you just do simple mathematics, here we are, a country that has got, and these are numbers given to us by the Minister of Finance at the presentation of the budget in the end of September, was something like $11.9 billion of foreign debt and almost $2 billion of government guarantees. Now, the 11.9, which is 12 billion, plus another 2 billion, that's maybe 14 billion of debt that we have, international debt. 114 billion kwacha of domestic debt. Now, if this is the numbers we are getting, that this is the kind of situation we find ourselves, I think we need to really be clear that this debt, big as it is, compared to the wealth of the country is not insurmountable. Let us look at the flip side of the coin. We are exporting about 1 million tons of copper at now $7,000 per ton. That's 7 billion kwacha. $7 billion. Then we are doing another $2 billion of cement, sugar, agriculture products, flowers, meat, livestock products. So you are talking of 7 plus 2, we're talking of $9 billion. $9 billion divided by 365 days in a year. That's giving you close to $25 million a day of revenue, of money that this country is earning. That means we're not a poor country. $25 million a day, 10 days is 250 million. 100 days, which is 1/3 of a year, is 2.5 billion. 2.5 billion means that in half a year we are receiving enough money to pay off some of our big debts. So how can we have this kind of money in terms of revenue, and then we are saying we've got a debt of $10-12 billion and it's too far, we can't resolve it? We can. It just depends on how we manage our resources. We need to be very clear about how we manage our resources. So if we are looking at $9 billion of revenue in a year and our debt is 14, it means 2 years of revenue, you have cleared your debt. 9 and 9 is $18 billion versus 12, 13 that you owe. You have the money. You can pay as a nation. Now the question is, how do you translate that revenue of $9 billion into economic value to the Zambian economy? That's where we have a challenge. And that to me is where the magic bullet is. That's where you can unlock the opportunity for Zambia to become self-sustainable, for Zambia not to borrow money from the outside world, for Zambia to grow based on the resources which we have as a country.
Okay, this one reads, morning Lorenzo and Mr. Dodia. Is it possible to come out of this debt stress without the IMF? I am thinking about countries like China, South Korea, who in just less than 50 years were poor countries. 50 years ago were poor countries. And I think they found an internal solution. Yes, true, borrowing with a clear plan to repay is a good idea. We are interdependent economies. Is there something that we can do internally, maybe agriculture or gold or oil, that can turn around this economy? I think while it is important as citizens to identify what leads to the current situation, it is also important to put our thinking gear in looking for solutions to lead us to our destination. It seems hard work and good vision can lead us to a place where we shall be comfortable in how we live with the goods and services affordable. Could it be the cycle of life? One generation works hard, the next benefits, and down tools and become lazy, and soon their children find hard times, and those children learn to be hardworking and lead their next generation to the promised land. The other point is, what could be wrong, I wonder, in countries that are hyper-Christian conscious like Zambia, Nigeria, South Africa, with thousands of members, yet poor work ethic and very lazy, a contradiction of our faith? This is coming through from Andre.
Well, I think that we can pull out of the debt crisis we are in. I've just said $9 billion worth of revenues per year with a debt of 12, 15, 14 billion means that 2 years, if you just took it from saying let's use the revenue to clear the debt, in 2 years you have cleared yourself. So of course it's not as simple as that, but I think it gives you indicators that this economy has capacity to seriously tackle the debt issue. The big challenge we have as a nation, and any nation in the world, is number one, you need to have vision. You need to have a plan. Where are we going? How are we going? What is our target? Then you need to have integrity. We want to go in this direction, want to achieve these things. We need to put our hearts and souls into making sure we get there and do it in the cleanest way possible. And the third one is commitment. We need to work together to achieve those goals, to commit ourselves to achieving those goals. And I think with these three, we can achieve anything that we want to achieve as a nation. You see, just getting money, a lot of money, does not mean you can progress. We know nations around the world who have got huge, vast amounts of oil, and they are enjoying the oil money. But are they developing the economies? They are not. Many of them are not. You see that the money is just being spent on luxury structures and huge, even competing on who can spend more money. And one day when that money dries up, what will happen to those economies? Even economies around us that have got diamonds and so forth, are we seeing the resources coming from those diamonds building a strong economy? Many of them, no, it's not happening. So having access to resources and having lots of money, actually, sometimes they call it the resource curse. Because you think money will come tomorrow, you stop planning for the future. You just get money, spend, get money, spend. And then when it dries up, you start saying, same there, I should have done. I should have done this, I should have done that, I should have done that, which we never did. So I think, yes, we can generate resources, as I've said, through our export earnings. But I also think that we need to have that vision, we need to have that integrity, and we need to make those commitments to investing the resources we have into a better Zambia for the future. And beyond that, we need to now say, okay, this is what we want to do, but how do we harness the opportunities to have a better economy that will improve the social well-being of our people and the economic and financial well-being of our people? It's diversifying. We've talked about it so much. Why are we constantly leaning on the mining sector to take us from one year to another? We look at agriculture. There's a huge amount of work we need to do in agriculture to develop the agriculture value chain. There's a huge amount of work we need to do in terms of tourism to shift the tourism focus to other areas of tourism in Zambia, Western Province, Northwestern Luapula, Northern Mchinga. Here we are, our children at primary school during their civics and geography and science, they are learning that we have got 7 major lakes in Zambia. They are learning that we have got 19 waterfalls. They are learning that we have got 21 national parks, that we have got about 4 or 5 lakes. What value are these natural resources to us? At the moment, nothing, except to write in our books all these numbers that we have. We need to convert these into tourism places where we can generate revenue. So moving from mining, we need to move to see how we can develop tourism in a big way, how we can develop the agriculture value chain, how we can sell services. This is something that we're thinking is new, but has always been there. Right now, we are speaking on radio. Everywhere in the world, anybody who understands English understands us. But I've listened to radio stations in West Africa, and I don't know what they are saying. They're speaking English, but I don't understand it. If you listen to the radio stations coming from the Caribbean, with a strong Jamaican, Rasta way of speaking, you don't understand what they are saying. So there are countries around the world that speak English that only they understand, nobody else understands. Zambians speak an English which is internationally understood. Are we using this resource to the benefit of our country? No, we are not. We should be exporting education, exporting health services, exporting consultancy, financial services, purely because we have English as a resource that we can use to do these things. These call centers we talk about, for the banks and insurance companies and airlines, they ought to be based in Zambia. So we really have great opportunity on how we can stimulate this economy and guide development in this economy to get the best of the resources we have in this country. Our resources are not just copper and timber and gold and emeralds. It's also Zambian human beings. How do you use Zambian human beings in the best way to generate revenue for this economy so that how people can live better lives. So I think there's a lot available that we can begin to work with as we go forward.
Mhm. All right. This one reads, Mr. Doja spoke of economically viable projects which would enable returns to pay back the significant external debt. As a businessman himself, and in view of the cost of doing business, what sectors would he hope that the Zambian government prioritized in its investment in order to enable small and medium enterprises and overall private sector to grow and be a greater contributor to the economic development? Is it access to reliable energy, generation and distribution, or telecommunications and internet service, etc., which, in his view, are priority areas of government investment? So this message is coming through from Michelle Morel. How do you respond to her, Mr. Dojo?
Yeah, well, you see, the big challenge we have here, firstly, you know, the biggest problem you can have with leadership is a leadership that thinks they know everything. Even in any company, as employees, we listen to the boss. And if the boss says, I want us to look at how we can better improve our business, can I get ideas from you, the staff? If the boss approaches it from that point of view, it means the staff feel very free to say anything. Some ideas will be completely ridiculous, some will be very powerful, and he listens or she listens and gets this information and says, okay, from these now let me pick out the ones that look like we can do something with them. Then you are getting the best from the people around you. But when you start the conversation with, I think that this company, we need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can I have people to comment on it? You have already closed the door that your ideas are the only ideas that should be considered. And I think that this is one of the challenges we have in leadership in our countries. You know, ministers, permanent secretaries try to dictate what the private sector should do. People will tell you, no, there's no need to do tourism in Western Province. What is there? There's nothing. Because there's no waterfall in Western Province. There is one. I know Ngonia Falls is there. But, you know, leave it to the private sector. Just, you say to them, look, we are facilitating the opening of tourism in the Western Province. Private sector, what can you do there? You'll be shocked at the ideas that will come out from the private sector, ones you have never thought about yourself. So one of the important things we need to do is to allow a little bit of freedom for people to think, for people to innovate, and for people to come up with economic and investment ideas. With the small businesses, you want to try and create opportunities for small businesses because small businesses tend to link to where big businesses and more dense populations are. So I think, yes, on the one side, you can develop your programs for the large businesses, but alongside them, you can do the linkages. Let's look at value addition in farming. Generally, you are talking of commercial farmers producing maize, but statistics show that the largest amount of maize that is being grown in Zambia from peasant farmers. So you are talking of small businesses. So the question of facilitating small businesses in terms of agriculture is outgrowers schemes and those kinds of things which tend to rope in the small businesses. You look at small businesses in the tourism sector, you have to have a deliberate policy. And I can give you one idea. Let's look at an area, say like, let's talk of Mongo. In Mongo, we decide that, look, we want to promote tourism in Mongo. Let the private sector come on board and do what they want. As government, what we are going to do is improve the infrastructure for the airport. Make sure that runway is a good runway. Make sure there's a proper control tower with all the landing instruments in place. Go into partnership with the private sector, probably the more bigger private sector in terms of building terminal buildings, you know, so that you have 20, 30 shops, restaurants, supermarkets in the airport infrastructure. But always make sure that in this infrastructure you are looking at a small mall that takes care of the small businesses, those that are doing handicraft and things. In the airport, they're able to sell their bangles, their things that are there. And you have to capture the small businesses in every step of the way that you look at how you are trying to attract the big businesses. Because the small businesses also play a significant role in creating the catalyst for international tourism. People don't come to Zambia to come and look at a rich man, how a rich man lives. They come into Zambia to see how Zambians live. And the Zambian is represented by the small business, by the cottage industry, and so forth. So you do these kinds of linkages at airports, for example. Not an airport which you want to emulate Dubai airport and say, no, the airport is only for rich people. No, that's already getting it wrong. You see, you look at the tourism opportunities. Yes, you are going to encourage people in Mongo to reconstruct the hotels which are the Ngulu, Liambai, Samwanawina, and make them into 4-star hotels. But you must also have a program for supporting small businesses, camping sites, the guest houses, and so forth, to be able to have that mix, and also getting these people to do tourism enterprises that are at their level. The higher level will have hot air balloons, which cost $20,000 per piece, and you have some big investor doing hot air balloons to view the Mongo floodplains from the sky. The smaller person will be doing something that is at their level, some small safari or whatever it is. I mean, a typical example is Livingston. There was a time in Livingston we were looking at bringing the rickshaws, which you see in India, you see them in Vietnam, Cambodia, where somebody's on a bicycle, but there are 2 seats behind where you can carry 2 people. Can you imagine rickshaws running from Livingston town to the falls on a daily basis, being done by the youth? So, and you have 100 of them. They're running up and down all the time, and people are paying 5 kwacha, 10 kwacha to cross the bridge to Zimbabwe, and so forth and so forth. And these are being done by small businesses. So we need to have deliberate programs that are looking at that. And that's me saying it. And I'm not a person who is in the tourism sector. I'm just looking at the opportunities. But the idea is to brainstorm, get these think tanks at the table and say, what can we do? How do we attract big business, and how do we at the same time capture the small businesses for them to get linked up in this overall activity of tourism, of agriculture, or even education? Just look at, I went to Bangalore in India, which is the Silicon Valley of India. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at the number of colleges there that teach English. Because of call centers. Mm-hmm. India has a lot of call centers for the world. Mm-hmm. Indians can't speak proper English. So there's hundreds of little schools to teach English, where people who speak good English are bringing these young Indians and teaching them how to pronounce these words properly so that they can get jobs in the call centers. These are the kinds of things that we need to be looking at, but done in a way where government facilitates the development of it, but allow private sector initiative to dominate what goes on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So for small industries and the small scale, yes, we have these ideas of industrial parks, we have these ideas of how we can link them to bigger businesses, but we can even look at even in the city. I look at Lusaka city, and I'm sure it's the same in Dola, Kitwe, and Livingston. You have street vendors. The reason why you have street vendors is because street vendors are looking for customers, and the customers are in the cars on the roads. Mm-hmm. But can you imagine if, say, around near Soweto Market, where those power lines, assuming that you can use the land under the power lines without putting structures, but you just put containers, 5, 10, 40-foot containers, you made them into those portable toilets to allow people to have access to ablution, and you decided to create markets. From one power line to the next power line, that's 100 meter in between there. You say this is where you people will be selling electronic goods, your chargers, your cables, your what have you. The other one is doing salaula of this. The other one is doing this. The public will know that if I want to go and buy electronics, I need to go to that place. And we are seeing market there. Yes, we are seeing it already. If you look at Freedom Way, around the area where Stanley Bar is, that area is an area specifically for medicines, There are about 20 to 30 pharmacy shops there
Just on
that
freedom
sell
in that
medicines. Yes. So anybody who's running a pharmacy in Lusaka goes there to go and buy wholesale and takes it to their pharmacy in Charleston.
And around
Yes.
the Millennium Bus Stop hardware shop.
Yes, you've got hardware shops around Millennium Bus Station. So already these kinds of things are happening. The Salaula is also in its own place. So we need to just help to guide our people as to how they can use their energies in the most cost-efficient way, most profitable way, and at the same time not becoming a nuisance to the public per se. Although personally, I have always appreciated the fact that I can buy talk time in less than 5 seconds on the road. I can buy sunglasses in less than 10 seconds on the road. And I'm even able to establish Congole with the vendors around Manda Hill. Yes, and they tell me, no, boss, take it. When I see you next time, you pay me. I mean, what kind of better service can you want than that, you know? So we need to look at these things from a very positive perspective. But it's very, very important that we support the small and medium businesses because they ought to become the large businesses of the future. And we need to handhold them and we need to make sure that they prosper. I always look at the small businesses as if it is part of a family. A man and a woman have 4 children. Even if their children are delinquents, they are obliged to correct those students, those children, because one day these children are going to inherit the wealth of the family. The chief accountant from Sri Lanka may come to count the money on behalf of the family, but they will never own that business. So you are under an obligation to train your family to make sure that at the end of the day, when they inherit from you, when you die, they are going to inherit and prosper with it. I think one of the callers highlighted that, you know, one generation builds, the other generation consumes and destroys, and then the cycle repeats itself. We need to find a way of how to stop that from happening. And part of it is to recognize that we have a responsibility to make sure that the incoming generation is going to be mentored and developed in such a way that we can grow from strength to strength. And for Zambia, for the economy, it means looking at the small and medium businesses. We need to see institutions like the Zambia Bureau of Standards spending 75% of their time mentoring businesses to follow standards. Door frame makers, door makers out of timber, window frame makers. Gentlemen, don't just make these things anyhow. There are certain standards. Follow these standards, and you'll find that the big contractors will be buying your door frames and window frames. That's the role of most of our regulators. That's what it ought to be. Only 25% of their time should be closing and inspecting and threatening the businesses for not following the mandatory standards. But otherwise, voluntary standards and support is extremely important. And we need to see this happening in a bigger way. We also need to see our civil service recognizing they need a mindset change. They need to say to themselves, look, money doesn't just come from the Ministry of Finance. That money comes from taxpayers. And if we facilitate taxpayers to pay more taxes, it means we are going to earn more money as government, and our salaries as civil servants can improve. So when somebody comes to Ministry of Lands and is asking for a service, be efficient. When somebody is coming to Ministry of Mines for a service, be efficient, because your end goal is to say, if I serve this private sector person and they prosper, I will prosper too, because it will translate to a bigger salary, bigger revenue collection by ZRA, and my life is also secured. And I think that mindset change is something we need to work on very aggressively.
Okay. All right. In conclusion, in about 2-3 minutes, Mr. Doja, how do you wrap up today's discussion?
I think that as a nation, we have huge challenges. We are right in the middle of what you called a debt crisis at the beginning of this program, owing about $13-14 billion of debt, foreign debt, plus another 114 billion kwacha of domestic debt. And if we go by the World Bank announcements, they said that Zambia's debt was the equivalent of about $30 billion. So meaning there's another 14 billion or so of private debt. This is not a comfortable position for an economy like us to be in. I think we need to be innovative. We need to be focused. We need to make commitments. And I think we also need to look more internally than out and externally. We need to look at what resources we have. We have export earning resources, which for the last 5 decades we have not considered as part of the development of our economy. I think it's high time we did that. Countries like South Africa, Egypt have always used export earnings as a major investment in their economy in terms of economic development and development of businesses. And I think it's time we also looked in that direction. Above all, I think we need to have checks and balance.